Today we're going to talk about the dangers of Christian conferences. Now, I know a lot of people love going to Christian conferences. They like hearing about the speakers or following their favorite speaker. They love all of the fellowship that goes on after the sessions, and they enjoy getting with Christians who have the same theology that they do. Many people like staying in a hotel room, going to the restaurants, and they treat them like a mini vacation. And for some people, they use these conferences as a time to rejuvenate themselves, not just for themselves, but also for their ministries. Now, so many people enjoy them, so why are they so dangerous? Well, conferences may have their benefits, but I've also seen them become a great hindrance to the spiritually immature. Conferences come in many flavors, and the danger of that is all the false teaching that is given. We're going to talk about the dangers of Christian conferences in just a second. I found a great article written by Dr. Eric Ayala, who's a pastor of Grace and Truth Church and Reformed Baptist Congregation in Plant City, Florida. The article is titled 6 Dangers of Good Christian Conferences. I read through the article and I thought it was worth sharing. What's interesting is that this article was written and published January 13, 2014. Now, I've read through it. Not much has changed, so we're going to talk about the dangers of Christian conferences. Now, here's a few things you might want to think about before you head off to that next conference. Conferences are planned, they're structured, they're organized and executed events that take months of advanced preparation just to pull off, depending upon the size of the event. Now, all event planners have contingency plans, such as traffic routes for the visitors, even for the speakers to exit unseen. Of course, you'll see walkie-talkie wearing staffs to put out all the small fires along the way. And keep in mind that even the questions of the speakers are selected and chosen. Even though the questions may be controversial at times, they're always within the purview of the event. These are well-oiled marketing machines. Take a look at this.
She is the founder of the 821 campaign. Her husband's name is Nick. She has 2 little girls. She's a preaching machine, a modern day liberator, a woman of God, and a family member. Come on, Code Orange Revival. Welcome to this stage, Christine, the Hurricane.
You are all about to go into orbit.
Now, I can understand if you don't want to spend good money on a disorganized mess. However, I've heard someone say, wow, I wish our church could run like this one. Well, here is the secret. Their church doesn't run like this either. The Sunday morning church service is not a Christian conference. As organized as an event may be, I guarantee that the sponsors' church are not as always refined, streamlined, and smooth. So don't compare your church to the latest marketing event that you went to. Conference speakers are emotionally detached. This is not an insult against conference speakers. It's just the reality. Most of the audience that the speaker is talking to, they have never met before in their life. And by the time of the conference over, you will still not have met them. The venues are usually a little too large for any type of meaningful relationship between the speaker and the crowd. Now, even in smaller settings, a handshake, some small talk, or maybe even a lunch is about the best that you're ever going to get. Now, your pastor, however, knows you. The pastor knows his congregation and what makes them tick. Because he knows them, he can speak to them, not just to a topic or an issue. Now, perhaps one of the temptations in the elevation of big name speakers over our local pastors and teachers is exactly because they are detached. Big name speakers can't truly challenge us in our lives where we are because they don't know us, but they're really good about mucking up what your pastor may or may not be doing in your congregation. Christian speakers can be helpful, but they are no substitute for a pastor or teacher. Now, where I see a lot of conferences go sideways is that conference lecturers can confuse what a sermon ought to be. Pastors are also affected by conference speakers. With the desire to become successful in ministry comes the desire to emulate others. And where do most pastors actually get to hear others preach? Well, at Christian conferences. This can confuse people as to what they should be doing during the Sunday morning sermon. Now, while I give much greater leeway to conference speakers on how they speak about topics in their message, what happens on the Lord's Day is very different. For instance, I have heard good talks on issues, mostly of a philosophical nature, that didn't actually open the Bible at the conferences at all. Now, this would be a red flag because we always say here at Doctrine Forensics, do not listen with an open mind. Listen with an open Bible. And I have seen a ton of conferences online, on YouTube. I've attended some conferences in my past, and the Bible was not open at all. And yet, because of the speaker's popularity, we give them a pass, and we shouldn't. Now, another thing to look out for is that understanding that congregants might enjoy the speaking style and charisma of the hot topic issues given by conference speakers, and then they expect their pastors to produce such every such morning. Not only would most conference talks actually be inappropriate for Sunday worship, but even those great speakers can't produce brand new sermons week in and week out with just the perfect amount of humor, illustration, imagery, and timing that you get from an often repeated conference event. Now, the most egregious things to me about these conferences is that you can see Christians promoting celebrity culture. Watch this.
Sometimes I wonder, is there more?
The watchmaker is at work to design a work of art in perfect balance within the body of his creation. In his image, there is more.
If you're still living under the condemnation of bondage of sin, look to Jesus. Look at the grace and the goodness, which is the glory of God. There is more.
You do belong in your sphere. You are graced, you are gifted, and you are called to that sphere.
The best gift we can give someone else is a better us. What's most powerful for all of us is if we change before we have to.
We're going to begin to realize we're in the midst of this incredible God-breathed miracle.
You can turn things around. You can turn people around with the right words.
In America, we like it big. And if someone has a big following or is speaking at a big conference, then that person instantly has our ear. I have seen the best and the most theologically sound of Christians get wrapped up in the wonder and awe and amazement of some big name speaker. Now, when they meet this person, they stand with their mouth gaping and in shock that this person of semi-divinity would even grace their presence. It's silly and it's idolatry. America left behind admiration of kings and queens, and instead we replace them with the celebrity. Oddly, many godly conference speakers and well-known theologians don't actually want such attention. Now, there will always be glory seekers, but when good men try to minimize their idolization, and yet we still do it, only one culprit is left: our sinful hearts. Conferences can promote fake spiritual growth. Some people can pride themselves on how many conferences they have been to, how many speakers they have heard, and how many books they have signed by the authors. It is easy to have a veneer of having it all together. After all, you're going to a Christian conference. I mean, it's like going to church even when you don't have to, but it must be more spiritual, right? Now, you can wear a sport coat, your favorite dress, eat at the restaurants, and stay at hotels as if you're on top of the world. We can start a list of Christian celebrities that we've met, and the less initiated can listen in awe about our proximity to the Olympians. Without the relationship of actual spiritual authority over you and peers to support you, it is easy to start to see spiritual growth as simply being able to catalog the views of famous speakers and inform others of your relationship to them. We get to present ourselves how we want to be seen, but not necessarily how we really are. The biggest threat is that conferences can deviate from the true work and authority of the church. With huge crowds, multiple churches and denominations represented, well-known speakers, and maybe even a little media hype, it's easy to think that if God was going to do something, then it must be at this event. I mean, there's just ordinary, boring life back at home. But the Christian conference must be where true ministry is happening. Even if we understand that church is important, surely though, the conference is a higher tier of ministry as more people have attention, right? Wrong. God is at work in the normal, ordinary means of the simple preaching of the word of God, the ordinances, and discipleship. The place where pastors shepherd, deacons care, and members serve God in their vocations and their families. True spiritual growth occurs in the context of God's local faithful assembly of believers. God has ordained his church for his kingdom ministry. And while a conference may encourage the church in that ministry, no conference or parachurch for that matter can ever replace it. Now, I'm not even talking about conferences or organizations that try to usurp the authority of the church, but rather those that do not, and yet we still allow them to do so in our hearts. We can let the conference mentality invade our congregations where we feel our pastors need to be bigger and have more exposure, and where the name of the church needs brand recognition to get us to the next level. The church is not a conference. In fact, the church is far better than a conference could ever be. The conference may be one step above entertainment. The church is where we see the true Christian life because she is the bride of Christ. Now, in conclusion, I know many of you are looking forward to an upcoming Christian conference this year, here in the fall of 2019. There's plenty to attend. I just want to call to attention and remind everyone to examine your motives and your heart the next time you hit the conference register button. Thank you for listening to Doctrine Forensics. If you like this material, please click like, subscribe, and share. God bless you and your family.